Hello there, my friendinos. I hope you've been doing good through all of the sucky things in the world. The world is really kind of garbage right now. This is the worst year I've ever lived through. So I'm gonna try to spread some happiness by talking about one of my favorite film directors, Bong Joon-Ho, who doesn't really make happy movies, but that's not the point, because talking about movies makes me happy, and talking about these movies is gonna make me happy because I really like all of Bong Joon-ho's films, and all of his films are very different. Not just from each other, but from literally anything else you will ever see in the world of film. His movies use a lot of genre blending to make them have a very unique feel compared to any other movie like them that would otherwise feel stale. I first watched a few of his movies before Parasite actually came out in America, but in the past few weeks I managed to watch all 7 of his films. Not all at once, but I've seen them all now, and I think they're all really good. I'm gonna rank all of them from worst to best, because he doesn't have a bad movie, in my personal opinion. And we shall begin the ranking with his first movie, Barking Dogs Never Bite, which came out in the year 2000. This was his directorial debut and clearly is his weakest film, just from filmmaking perspective and screenwriting perspective. It's very slow and drags a bit in the middle, and even somewhat towards the end it starts to be kinda confusing. It's very interesting always to look at a director's first movie or earliest movies before they really hit it big. Because this wasn't an instant breakout hit for him, even in South Korea where he's from. It kind of took him a little bit to get going in terms of success in his movies. I don't know how to describe Barking Dogs Never Bite. It's like a dark comedy drama. The genre blending was evident from the get-go for him, and it's something he's done in pretty much all of his movies. And Barking Dogs Never Bite is very, very weird and crazy and has a lot of stuff happening. It takes place mostly in an apartment complex. It starts out with just the simple premise of guy hears dog in the apartment complex and wants to get rid of it. It progresses past that point to a much greater level of drama than you would expect. It gets crazy, it is weird. I really like it, even though I don't think compared to his other movies it really stands much of a chance in being considered a classic. Even on its own, it's not like amazing. I probably like it more than most people do. It's not a movie anyone would really watch if they don't have any interest in Bong's films already. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you are trying to finish all of his films. In that case, I definitely think it's entertaining. Next up at number 6 is his film Okja, which came out in 2017 on Netflix. Unlike Barking Dogs Never Bite, this is a movie I can pretty easily recommend to people who haven't seen this movie, but you would have to go in knowing that it is going to be completely different from anything you've ever seen, and it is weird. I would probably say this is Bong's weirdest movie, for a few reasons. One, this probably has the most genre blending of any of his movies. It's really, really hard to classify it as anything. Like, I wouldn't really call it a comedy, but I also wouldn't call it a drama. I wouldn't say it's action, but it has action. I wouldn't say it's fantasy, because it's mostly a realistic world other than having giant fantasy pigs that don't really exist in our world. Maybe it's horror because Jake Gyllenhaal is terrifying. It's kind of everything, and that's part of what I love about it. Yes, I'm putting it at 6th place, but this is honestly one of my favorite movies, kind of. It's a little weird to explain. Yes, I'm ranking this low, because in the context of Bong's filmography, it clearly doesn't stand up compared to the others. It's just so weird and kind of hilarious sometimes, and the characters are really likable, and the story is, again, very unique, and I really love it, even though it's just so strange It makes a lot of sense that this was released on Netflix as well, because it does just kind of have that easygoing, anyone can watch this type of vibe. I mean, I say easygoing, it does get pretty dark in the last half hour or so. The final 20 minutes is honestly kind of terrifying and really disturbing for someone like me who does not like eating meat. But I would absolutely recommend this movie. It's so much. It's just so much, honestly. There is a lot going on. It has really weird performances from Tilda Swinton and Jake Gyllenhaal. This was a collaboration with Hollywood, by the way. This was his second collaboration with an American studio. The first being Snowpiercer, which I'll get to later. I really don't know how to describe it. It's just so different from anything you've ever seen before. I think that's easy to say. And speaking of Snowpiercer, which I just said that I would talk about later, I forgot that I have it ranked next. It's number 5, Snowpiercer. This is a really good action movie and drama and sci-fi thriller. Again, the genre blending is really strong in this film, and this was his first collaboration with Hollywood actors and producers. It stars Chris Evans and Tilda Swinton and John Hurt and other famous actors not from Korea, as well as having Song Kang-ho, one of the most famous actors from Korea, who has also collaborated with him several times. This movie is so depressing, honestly. It follows people who live in the back of this train that houses literally the last of life on Earth, most of which is American and Korean for some reason. Don't ask, it's kind of weird. This specific group of people decide to revolt against the rich upper class people from the front and try to fight their way to the front. Again, that's a much simpler explanation than what the movie is actually about and what it discusses. The themes in it are very strong. The action is really cool and honestly great. The acting is amazing. The dialogue is super great. The CGI is terrible. It's really bad, actually. Like, there are some very noticeably terrible moments involving the train crashing through barriers of ice that just stand out in otherwise great scenes. And then there's also some characters in the story that I don't really care too much for or aren't properly built up. But this movie is just really, really cool, and definitely I would recommend this for people who want a different type of action movie. I think a lot of the appeal in watching this would be in Chris Evans being in it. He's very different from anything you've seen him in before, and he's great as well. This is maybe the best I've ever seen him. And the entire cast is also really good, though again I should reiterate that this is not a happy movie by any means. It's really crazy. All of his movies are crazy. I do love this movie though. It's pretty awesome. And I would recommend you check it out if it sounds interesting to you. Next up at number 4 is Mother. Again, if I describe the plot of this movie, it will sound a lot simpler than it actually is. A mother who lives with her son tries to protect him when he's accused for a murder. It goes a lot deeper than that, and I absolutely will not spoil a single thing about this movie. It is amazing how Bong makes you feel so many different things during the course of this movie. In one scene, you go from feeling interested to sad to freaking angry. The ending of this movie is one of the most frustrating I've ever seen, not to give anything away. It's an incredible ending that makes the entire movie worth watching, even if you weren't already interested in it. The lead performance from the woman who plays the mother, she's great, and as far as I can tell, I don't think she's been in too many movies. The genre blending isn't as clear in this one. It's mostly a crime drama with some elements of thriller and dark comedy in there, so kind of usual for Bong. But it still manages to be completely different from any other kind of crime drama, murder, mystery, thriller type story. This is one I can't really easily recommend to people who aren't used to Bong's films already, once again. And once again, as the plot would make it sound, this is another very unhappy movie. You laugh sometimes because there are some pretty great humorous moments. This is a depressing movie, which is something Bong is very good at doing. And I suppose that'll move us on to the next one. Number 3, which is The Host. Host is a movie that I had to watch a second time to really get a full opinion on. Not because it's one of those that you have to see twice to figure out, but because I wasn't paying attention to it the first time I watched it. I had a lot of trouble keeping up, and I might have just been tired. I don't really remember. When I did watch The Host the second time though, I made sure to pay closer attention to it, and I really loved it the second time. The Host has a lot more genre blending than you might think just from the name of it and the title. That's the same thing. The genre blending in The Host is a little bit more subtle than usual, but it's still clearly there. While it might seem like just a regular monster movie, especially from the opening 20 or 30 minutes, and by the description of the movie, it just seems like it's going to be a regular monster movie. And once again, there's a lot more going on in this movie than you would think. A lot involving viruses and quarantining and staying separated from people who might have a virus. But this is a great movie that's far more of a drama than it is a monster movie. It has some great monster attack scenes, especially near the beginning. The very first one is awesome. But it also has a lot having to do with characters and the way they interact with each other. 3 of the main characters are siblings, and you also have their older father, and the main character's daughter was stolen away, so there's a lot of tension in the family. All of them are set up amazingly through different conversations, just casual little mentions of things that make you immediately realize how these characters are going to act. And all of the characters have faults that come into play throughout the story. They're not perfect. They're not meant to seem perfect. And there are some great moments that come from these things, especially some conversations that come from the characters. This is just a great drama that also has a monster that's eating people and spitting out their bones. The biggest, really only problem I have with this movie is the monster. It doesn't look great. The CG has definitely not aged great. I doubt that it even looked that great when the movie came out. The design of the monster is awesome. It's really unique, really cool. It has tentacles that it can like slingshot with, or I guess grappling hook more accurately. And it's a very scary presence in some of the scenes as well. But the ending of this movie is great. The climactic moments are just so crazy good that I don't know why I didn't really vibe with this movie the first time I watched it, other than that I was tired. I actually thought it was his worst movie at first watch. I was dumb. I can admit that. I think The Host is great. It's a really, really good drama disguised as a monster movie to make people interested in watching it. You come for the monsters, you stay for the people, and I think that's really the best thing a movie like this can do. Number 2 is one of the few of his films that I still have only seen one time, this being his second film, Memories of Murder. Memories of Murder is probably the most straightforward of his movies in terms of genre and plot. It is a murder mystery where people are being killed by someone that is anonymous, and the police have to try to find this person through the messages that are being left. It's very similar to Zodiac in that way. But I'd say it's better than Zodiac as well, even though I do love that movie too. This movie, again, is a lot more straightforward. It is just a straightforward crime drama, rather than throwing in some weird elements of dark comedy or action or anything. This is a super engaging movie. The mystery of what's happening is super intriguing. The cops and the detectives are really interesting characters who have a lot of drama between each other and fight quite often, and there are consequences to their actions, and the ending is also just great. It's a really, really good movie. This is basically just an easy recommendation for anyone who wants to watch films. Anyone who's really interested in film, especially film outside of America. This would be a really great movie to be someone's first not in English. I could probably say that about a bunch of Bong's films, of course, but this one especially, though maybe not quite as much as some of his other ones, especially Parasite. And obviously Parasite is my number one since I haven't talked about it yet. Man, I'm really sad that I didn't see this before the Oscars because I would have been so happy to talk about it in my top 10 video, and I would have been so happy when it won. I mean, I already was. I watched the Oscars live, and when they announced Parasite as Best Picture, I was so happy, and I hadn't even seen the dang movie yet. When I finally did get to see it, I was so excited, but really worried that I was going to be disappointed, and I was not. I love this movie. This is another one that has genre blending to the point that it's kind of hard to classify it. The first half feels a lot like a comedy, maybe even some dark comedy, and it shifts midway to something that I won't say because I don't want to spoil this movie for anyone who has not seen it, because this movie should be gone into knowing as little as possible. If you don't know anything about this movie but think it sounds interesting, absolutely I recommend it. It is just one of the most perfectly constructed narratives ever. The way it uses foreshadowing, the way the characters converse, the way situations unfold, the direction is insane. This is just pretty much the most perfectly crafted movie that it could have ever been. It is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. It's definitely one of my favorites from last year. I still probably prefer Marriage Story, but it doesn't really matter because they're very different types of movies. I'm very glad that Parasite won Best Picture as well because it's the only nomination of the year, besides maybe Joker, that wasn't mostly a straightforward drama. Those are the two Best Picture nominations from last year that were a little bit more than what you would expect to be nominated for Best Picture. Fingers crossed they'll start nominating more movies like Parasite in the future. We can only see what happens in the future. Who knows what movies are even going to come out in the future. And that's my ranking. Obviously, I recommend all of these movies. My question of the day will be, what's your favorite Bong Joon-Ho film, if you have seen any of them? And if you haven't, you should get on that. Many of them are on Hulu, a couple of them are on Netflix. He very quickly became one of my favorite directors of all time, despite not even having heard of him at the start of last year. Subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Maybe I'll get better in the future and it won't be like this. Follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd, and you can suggest video ideas for me in the comments below. I will read every comment you leave for me, and until next time, I'll see you next time. Why am I dancing? I don't know.